Hello. In this video, we're going to be getting the Platinum Trophy for Alan Wake, plus the 17 DLC trophies for the 100%. This might be one of the most slept on games of the 2010s, and I personally have been waiting a long time to get to playing it. Get it? Slept on? Because his name is Alan Wake. I'll let myself out. Anyway, I had a really good time with this game. The only part that was kinda iffy for me was the number of collectibles. To get this platinum, you need 2, pick up 100 coffee thermoses, 106 manuscript pages, watch 14 TV shows, listen to 11 radio shows, read 25 signs, loot 30 supply chests, and knock over 5 stacks of cans. That is almost 300 collectibles, and my first playthrough only took me about 13 hours while picking all of those up. This is luckily one of those well-coded games where after you pick it up one time, you have it forever, along with an in-game tracker for each individual collectible. Still, I thought it was best to follow a guide to minimize how many playthroughs were needed, which I hate doing, but it is what it is. But on top of the collectibles, we need to defeat 50 to 100 enemies with each weapon, defeat 20 enemies by indirect means, which is knocking them off a cliff or getting them to walk into electricity, reload the flashlight 100 times, beat the game on the hardest difficulty where there's extra manuscript pages exclusive to that difficulty, and some more silly surprise miscellaneous trophies. One last thing before we get started, I want to say I really love the trophy list for this game. You can really tell when a developer cares for that area of their game, and Remedy 100% did. The names and descriptions actually have meaning tied to the action that unlocks them, and I love little things like that. With all that yapping out of the way, let's dive into Alan Wake. So we start episode 1 with a writer named Alan Wake, believe it or not. In the middle of a nightmare, Alan is trying to reach a lighthouse. He then promptly commits vehicular manslaughter. He just kind of pretends that didn't happen and continues on his merry way, where we come to a bridge that has our first coffee thermos. 1 out of 100! The guy Alan turned into a speed bump resurrects himself somehow and is a bit unhappy with the situation. This big light orb in the sky gives Alan a rundown of how things work here, which is basically that the light is good and the darkness is bad. Then that thing starts cranking 90s before giving him a flashlight and a firearm. It then explains Speed Bump Man is being shielded by darkness, which Alan needs to burn off with a flashlight before he can... The light heads out and we unlock our first trophy called Follow the Light for completing the tutorial, I'm assuming. Follow the light. Hooray! There's also a stack of cans here, which I poked to start those. I made a little oopsie after that because I dropped off a ledge not knowing there was a thermos at the top, so I panicked for a bit. Help me! Help! Before just accepting defeat and restarting the checkpoint, which luckily put me back at the top. After that whole debacle, a giant tornado decides to form, so that's great. Thanks, guys. Alan finally makes it to the lighthouse and is immediately woken up by his wife. He kind of irritates me here because he literally despises being famous. Like, the first thing this guy says after waking up is basically, it pisses me off how many people would care if I died in my sleep. Like, what are you talking about? Moving on though, their destination is a town called Bright Falls, which is supposed to serve as a relaxation retreat, which is supposed to serve as a relaxation retreat for Alan because he's been dealing with some writer's block after finishing his latest novel. Alan meets an old guy named Pat Main, who's the host of a radio show and might be important later. I don't know, stick around to find out. Smash that like button, subscribe, and hit that bell, guys. Stopping by a diner to retrieve the key for their cabin, Alan gets annoyed by another fan, and this old guy asks him to put on Coconut, number 6 in the jukebox, for him, which will get us a trophy later if we comply with his demand. He doesn't find the owner of the cabin, but he does find his creepy wife dressed in funeral attire who gives him the key, so that'll do, I guess. At the cabin, we find our first radio show, which is just the guy from the ferry and the fan from the diner talking about Alan's presence in the town. That's it, really. Then we find a generator to power everything in the cabin, and after turning it on, we unlock our second trophy, Let There Be Light. Let there be light. Let's go. There's a time skip to nightish, and Alice reveals that she got Alan a typewriter so that he can write during his vacation away from the stress of writing and see a therapist. What? Man, come on! Alan gets mad and leaves, and then the power goes out. This is probably a good time to mention Alice has nyctophobia, which, as you can guess, is a fear of the dark. So Alan rushes back in to find out she broke through this railing and into the water below. Oh no! He then wakes up in a car hanging off the side of a cliff and is just as confused as I am on how he got there. I guess that's why they call it Alan Wake. This is when the game actually starts with the task of getting to this gas station to call for help. Walking through the forest, that light orb from earlier reappears and spits a piece of paper at Alan. This piece of paper is a manuscript of Alan's next novel called Departure, which he didn't even start yet. It's a bit confusing in it. We actually get 2 manuscript pages here. Only one matters though, which details how the hero gets attacked by an axe murderer in the woods. After a few encounters with the Taken, we loot our first supply chest, which is padded to by yellow paint revealed by our flashlight. Cool. After a bunch of running around and fighting some Taken, we were doing well. We find our second can pyramid here, and I just jumped on the table in a very uncivilized manner to knock it over instead of shooting it. 10 feet from that, we find the second radio show where Pat is talking to a guy who says he was walking his dog Toby before he ran off, and he asks anyone listening to return him if found. Then like 10 feet from there, we find our 10th coffee thermos. While some Taken repeatedly chucked axes at me from a distance, I managed to perform a perfect dodge, which unlocks a trophy called Float Like a Butterfly. Check this shit out. After launching that absolute nuke, we find our first TV show called Night Springs. This particular episode is a bit complicated. Basically, a scientist is demonstrating a machine that grants him quantum immortality. He says at any given point in your life where you can die, two realities are created, one where you die and one where you don't, and this machine is supposed to guarantee the latter reality somehow. This is actually really interesting, but anyway, someone kicks the plug for the machine, so it shuts off and he shoots himself. Then Alan finally gets to fight this clown with an axe, Carl Stuckey. With him out of the way, Alan has a clear path to the gas station. As soon as we get here, we find our 10th manuscript outside. And there's also a thermos in the opposite direction of the gas station, which is a trap because Taken swarm you as soon as you touch it. I'm not gonna lie to you, they beat my ass. Anyway, moving into the gas station, we immediately get to watch our second TV show. This one is just Alan walking around a room going a little bonkers. Through a door to the left is our first sign, which is an advertisement for a parade called Deer Fest.
Open the door! Open the door!
Back to the issue at hand, Alan is finally able to call the sheriff, who shows up and first of all tells him the cabin they're staying in hasn't been there for 40 years. She then asks if he knows where Stuckey is, and Alan obviously can't tell her. He Fortnite double pumped him out back about 5 minutes ago, so he keeps that to himself. And with that, episode 1 is complete, which unlocks our 5th trophy, Bright Fall's Finest.
Previously on Alan Wake.
We start episode 2 with a flashback from 3 years ago. All that happens here is the power goes out, Alice goes wah, and Alan shows her a light switch from when he was scared of the dark as a kid because it helped calm him down. Also, here's where we're at for collectibles. Back to the current timeline, Alan gets checked out for his head injury and then is questioned by the sheriff about what's going on with his wife. Speaking of his wife, she calls him, but it's not her. It's seemingly someone who kidnapped her, telling Alan to stop talking to the police and that he can find evidence of how serious he is behind the station. Stepping outside, we find a thermos and our third radio show. Basically, all that said is two guys were publicly drunk to celebrate completing their float for Deerfest, and that's it. Moving on to where the alleged kidnapper told Alan to go, Alice's driver's license is on the front seat of an abandoned car. He might actually be serious, I don't know. Back inside, a TV flashbangs Alan to give us our third TV show, which is just Alan tweaking about how he can't stop writing his novel or Alice will die. We then meet the therapist who Alice was talking to and the reason they're both here, which goes well.
My clinic is a place where
Alan's agent and best friend, Barry Wheeler, happens to show up at this moment to threaten to sick lawyers on everyone involved, so they all decide to part ways pretty quickly. Alan tells Barry about everything that's happened so far, which would leave Barry to believe he's gone bonkers, if not for the fact that Alan was actually writing something. He's supposed to meet the kidnapper, so after a time skip, we head out on our way to do that. But first, behind this sick cabin we're staying at is our 20th thermos, hooray! A bit down the road we find an unoccupied cabin which houses our 4th radio show. I think the guest on this one is the doctor who checked Alan out a bit ago. They just talk about how old they are and that the doctor likes to fish. A bit down the road from that, we find a second desolate cabin which contains our 4th TV show. This one is an interrogation of a guy who murdered another guy at his son's soccer game with his bare fists for the reason of, quote, not liking his face. However, while the face of the victim was so messed up it couldn't be ID'd, the fingerprints were found, and they're the same as the killer. Holy shit. The victim was also wearing a white shirt, however the killer's son said his dad wore that shirt to the game. Then the show ends. It's a weird episode. At the main area for all of these cabins, the park ranger is waiting for us, very gravely injured. After making him wait for me to loot the area, Alan approaches him and he says he read a page from the manuscript, which came true. Then he asks Alan to turn the lights on, so we of course first grab a thermos and our 20th manuscript page. The circuit breaker for the place was circuit broken by someone, so the lights are a no-go. We go back to the park ranger and he's disappeared.
Definitely concerns me a little bit, you know what I mean?
And there's now some weird oil patches on the ground. Tiptoeing past them, the park ranger tries to catch us by surprise with a sneak attack from the roof. During this fight, we unlock a trophy for performing 20 slow-mo dodges. And then after, continuing on our way to Lover's Peak, which is where the kidnapper said to meet him, we take a detour into a cave to find our 5th supply chest, which unlocks a trophy called Finders Keepers. I decided at this point to start trying to get a collateral shotgun hit, and this is how that went.
Hey, what's up, guys? It's Skip.
Me bomba!
After the mental warfare I went through to get that, this is where we're at statistically. Alan then hops on a gondola, which of course that ride goes well. He drops his flashlight on the way out, and then a random Good Samaritan saves him from a bunch of taken. The guy gives Alan some flares to use, which I immediately messed up.
You can see them too?
Hell, of course I see him. Come on, we gotta move.
Why?
Alan immediately theorizes this is the kidnapper for several reasons. This portion of the game is spent with no gun, just burning the taken while this guy misses 24 shots for every single one he hits. After surviving with his life in this clown's hands, Alan finally reaches Lover's Peak, where we find our 25th coffee thermos, unlocking our 10th trophy. Alan then continues to fight for his life with no gun, no shoes, no service, until he falls over the edge and the kidnapper disappears. But he got his gun back. From the distance, the kidnapper yells that he wants the rest of the manuscript or he's gonna do something not very cool to Alice. Alan decides to head back to Barry to regroup, and after waddling around for a minute, we pick up our 25th manuscript, which unlocks a trophy. This manuscript is kind of interesting though. It's about Alice's fear of the dark, which she says is more of something you can touch and feel rather than just being a simple absence of light. Anyway, right after that, I knocked over our 3rd can pyramid with my toes and then continued fighting for my life. I also figured out this crazy strategy for generators. You start them with some QTEs and then you get a big light to keep you safe and serve as a checkpoint. Nobody's ever done this strat before though. Okay, so you drop a flare to keep the enemies back, and then you start the generator. Alan passes through this old watermill where we get a few collectibles inside. Once through it, he does a little parkour and we can pick up our 30th manuscript. Pretty soon after, Alan stops at a bathroom to pick up some car keys, and we get to watch our 5th TV show, which is just some more CCTV footage of Alan tweaking, talking about how a written story is sentient and has a mind of its own. Ignoring that, we get in a car and immediately we then drive in the wrong direction, intentionally, pull a little 3-point turn, and pick up our 30th thermos. While running for my life, I was able to line up a picture-perfect flare shot and unlock a trophy called Come One, Come All for taking out 4 enemies with a single flare. I actually somehow managed to brick the car I was driving by hitting too many things. I decided at this point to make an executive decision, and I got to the point of being 1 away from unlocking a trophy for kills using a car, so as soon as I restarted and flattened the guy blocking the gate again, we have to go a bit off the beaten path to reach a campsite, which has our 4th can pyramid and a thermos, and in case you were wondering, these are our current statistical standings. On the final walk back up the hill to Barry, Alan gets a call from the kidnapper saying he wants the manuscript in
2 days, city boy.
Reaching the cabin, it's swarmed by birds and Alan has to fight them off. I took this as a good time to farm them for a trophy requiring you to kill 1,000 birds. That's a large number, so I think farming was the right move here. It took a minute, but we eventually eliminate the 1,000th bird and unlock If It Flies, It Burns. Alan enters the cabin to save Barry and then sends him into town to see if anyone can recognize the kidnapper, while Alan tries to force himself to write the manuscript. Barry then gets a very monotonous call from Rose, who was the fan from the diner, saying she found Alan's manuscript. It's then revealed she is very obviously possessed by the dark presence. And with that, the episode is complete, which of course in turn unlocks our 15th trophy, Park Ranger.
Previously on Alan Wake.
Episode 3 starts with Alan and Barry at Rose's trailer park, having the owner, I think, take them to her trailer. Barry's kind of an asshole to him, which will surely not cause any issues later. For now though, Rose lets them in and offers them coffee or something, which, believe it or not, was drugged. Alan wakes up in her bedroom many hours later and our 6th TV show plays, which is again Alan tweaking, this time about having an imaginary editor influencing his manuscript. Moving on our way back to the entrance, we find our 5th radio show, where Pat talks to a guy who ominously says he got into an argument with his friend, arrested, released on bail, there's something in the air, and then he dips. It's a little concerning. At the entrance to the park, Barry being an asshole did indeed cause issues later because the owner called the police on Alan due to them being in there all day and Rose disappearing. This FBI agent named Nightingale has beef with Alan to the point where he opens fire with the civilian standing in front of him. Also, he keeps calling him the name of different authors, and I didn't recognize a single one besides H.P. Lovecraft. After almost getting our boy Randolph killed, Alan runs into the woods to escape the police. The Dark Presence takes out all of the cops searching for Alan, which Nightingale believes is Alan and tries to convince the sheriff of the same. Then we find a crashed police car with some flashbangs in our 6th radio show. This one's just about the gunshots at the trailer park, with Pat saying he's pretty close nearby. I immediately started trying for a trophy, which requires you to take out 4 enemies with a single flashbang.
Number 9, help me.
After we unlock that, we run into a cave for our 10th supply chest. Then Alan reaches the radio station where Pat is broadcasting from to see if he can give him some directions to the coal mine he's supposed to meet the kidnapper at. We walk in on his current radio show, which counts as our 7th. Literally as soon as they start talking, after again running from the police a bit and turning on a generator, I got my ass beat a little, and we unlock a trophy for using a flare while really low on health. Even more running from the police, and we encounter our 5th can pyramid, which gives us the Carney trophy after we dismantle it. Right after that, we pick up manuscript number 40, then climb onto a train bridge and start getting attacked by poltergeists. Inside a depot for said trains, we find our 7th TV show. In this one, a journalist is impregnated with allegedly thousands of offspring of a Lovecraftian god named Nixie Perka. That's basically it. It was really weird. Then a possessed bulldozer tries to pancake Alan, but we hit it with some flares to take it out easily. You can actually miss this by not destroying it and just waiting for a gate to open, which is a little interesting. Anyway, we do take it out, pick up our 40th thermos, and hop in a truck to make our way to the coal mine. After a short cutscene, Alan says he's determined to get Alice back despite having no manuscript. Then I ran around for approximately 10 minutes looking for a red chair with a thermos sitting on it.
Motherfucker, where is it? Where the is it? I swear to God. You laughing, girl?
We then take a little detour for the 8th radio show of the game. Pat just understandably shit talks Nightingale in this one. About 2 minutes of driving from that, we find a fire watchtower which has the 9th radio show. This one's Pat and a doctor discussing love, where the doctor brings up criticism about the concept of soulmates.
But the idea that there's that one special person out there for you, and if you miss that chance, it's gone forever and you're forever incomplete. I mean, isn't that depressing? Or heck, childish even?
Quick stat check to ground us after that touching speech. Back on the way to the mine. Okay, well, at the mine, Alan sits there literally all day waiting for the kidnapper, who does not show up expectedly. So now it's night again, and he calls Alan to tell him to meet him at a place called Mirror Peak. As soon as this phone call ends, a timer starts for a trophy called Meet the Deadline, which requires you to get to Cauldron Lake in under 30 minutes. We cut power to a building in order to cross over a fence, which takes away our protection of the light and allows me to hit some Taken with the flare gun, unlocking our 20th trophy. In the same area, while trying to take enemies out by indirect means, we unlock the trophy for capping 50 Taken with the revolver. After a little bit more running, I'm not at all sure what caused this, but we unlock the Collateral Carnage trophy for kills by indirect means. The description says this can be by drowning or electrocuting. Making them fall off a cliff also counts, but I just shot number 20, so I guess that'll forever be a mystery. Not much happens for a good 10 minutes besides a few collectibles and fighting some enemies. We do get another trophy for destroying 20 poltergeist objects, though. Pretty soon after, we get attacked by a whole ass train, which gives us another trophy for taking that out just like the bulldozer. Inside the building past the train, we find our 8th TV show. This is once again Alan tweaking, except he just actually completely explains the entire game here. So to start, there was a guy very similar to Alan a long time ago named Thomas Zane. He's the giant light that gave us the tutorial and helps Alan out sometimes. But basically the lake is evil and villainous, so it turns artistic creations into reality. Also, Zane's girlfriend or wife was taken by the darkness, so that might be important later, I'll let you know. That's all the information they give us for that, so we drop into a mine shaft and pick up our 50th manuscript. Alan then takes out some miners and moves a crane to ascend his way back out. Once out, he gets on a cable car, which you already know. He's miraculously fine and able to drag himself across a rickety old suspension bridge to collect our 50th thermos. Some feats of superhuman strength later, Alan passes through an abandoned building, which ends our time for Meet the Deadline. As you can probably guess by the timer and lack of trophies, I was not able to get here in time, both because of the collectibles and because I am stupid. At this point, I just figured we can try again on the hardest difficulty. I wasn't very optimistic, but we'll show how that went after this commercial break. I lied and I will not be showing how it went until my next playthrough, so stick around for that anyway. For now, we meet back up with the kidnapper who is pleading with something. Then he just gets swept up by a sick and twisted tornado of darkness, which presumably kills him. It tries to take Alan too, but he's not a sus Ohio NPC like the kidnapper, so he lights a flare, which still flings him off the edge and pretty far down into the water, but at least he's not dead. And that's the end of episode 3, unlocking our 25th trophy, Wheels Within Wheels.
Previously on Alan Wake, I'm hunted by the law.
Episode 4 starts with Dr. Hartman telling Alan that Alice is dead and basically the entire game has been spent as a patient in his clinic. Yes, this is the same Dr. Hartman that Alice brought him here to be treated by. A decent chunk of this next portion of the game is just Alan following Hartman around while he tells him, your wife is dead, you are schizophrenic, you must not have another episode, and you are safe. Alan follows him outside and we read a sign attached to a huge sundial, which is our 10th sign. He also discovers he can see where the cabin he and Alice were staying at is, and it's indeed gone. Alan is taken to the dining room and we meet the 2 guys from the diner all the way back at the beginning of the game. Hartman tells Alan they're named the Anderson brothers and were in a Norse mythology themed band in the 80s, but they now have dementia, so he just lets them chill with rubber hammers while they spout nonsense.
I'd like to bash his head in with a hammer.
He then heads back to his room, watching the 9th TV show on the way. Once again, it's Alan tweaking, this time about being stuck in the cabin, saying he saw his editor again, describing her as a dark presence wearing an old woman's face with a hole in her chest where her heart should be. He also realizes at this point the darkness is not his friend and is using him to get the story at once. I don't know how it took him this long, but whatever. Back in his room, he decides to give writing a shot at Hartman's request until a storm starts up, which gets the other patients a little rowdy and allows him to sneak out of the room to try and get out of here because he's not buying any of what Hartman's selling. One of the Anderson brothers hits a nurse in the head with a hammer and we swipe her keys. With the keys, we move into Hartman's offices and play a tape recorder, which is from his calls with Alice. She basically just says Alan does nothing but try to write, getting frustrated with his inability to do so. Then Hartman says, yeah, sure kid, just get him here and I'll fix it.
Yeah, sure, step aside, kid, we're not.
Alan plays another tape about how a patient who was showing no improvements at all suddenly became Van Gogh as soon as Alan was brought in.
Da Vinci?
He says this patient is easily controlled and useful, basically revealing that he's evil and only treating them so they can warp reality using the lake. As soon as we play the final tape, we unlock a trophy called Medical Opinions for listening to all of them. This last one is just him beefing with Nightingale, who showed up to try to haul Alan in.
I'm buying that. I was tailing Wheeler, and this is the only place he could have gone.
Moving on out of that room, we enter his actual office and find out he locked Barry inside, which sounds a bit illegal. On his desk, Alan finds all of the manuscript pages he had on him, which immediately grounds him and proves Hartman a liar. Just then, the devil himself walks in and...
Back into the...
Tell me one more lie and I'll shoot you in the face.
After fighting his way through the building for a bit, he burns these 2 bear statues out of the way, and we can turn on a TV to unlock a trophy called Boob Tube. I don't think this counts as a TV show. Quick stat check before we break out of the building and head into a hedge maze, where we find our 60th manuscript. After Alan fights a taken Hartman, we take a little detour for our 15th supply chest and meet up with Barry to head to the Anderson brothers farm because they apparently know some stuff about the darkness that might help. An avalanche flips their car.
Don't worry, your cutout is fine.
Forget that.
After finding a stronger flashlight, we find a semi-destroyed building with our 60th pristine thermos just chilling in there. On the way through another minefield of bear traps, we unlock the trophy for 50 shotgun kills. Inside a cabin similar to the one Alan is staying at with Alice, we get flashbanged for our 10th TV show. Another Alan tweaking episode, this time saying he's writing himself into the story as the protagonist, which is extremely risky, but the only way he can think of to save Alice. He also says this needs to be a real story with risks, as opposed to just writing Alan saved Alice and they lived happily ever after the end. Pretty close to the farm, we head up into another Firewatch tower for our 10th radio show. This one is Pat talking about the storm and giving a briefing about Alice since the sheriff put out a missing persons report for her. Finally, at the farm, I actually missed a thermos because I walked slightly too far and started a cutscene.
No! No!
Then Alan and Barry work together to defend a stage against a bunch of Taken while a banger track plays in the background. I unfortunately cannot play it. During this fight, we unlock Thunder and Lightning for 50 flashbang kills, and then our 30th trophy, Taken Season, for 50 hunting rifle kills. After a small mess up on my part, I was able to complete the stage defense without dropping into critical health, which unlocks Child of the Elder God. Right after the fight, we walk forward a bit for our 70th manuscript before entering a barn for our 11th TV show. I got distracted and didn't watch that one, but moving on, we head upstairs to a different part of the barn for our 11th and final radio show, unlocking the KBF FM trophy.
As you regular listeners know, I tend to work through the night.
This one was pretty boring though, just two cops talking about how busy they are since Deerfest is so close, while one of them keeps getting close to revealing details about their business with Alan, which they don't want out there. Heading back outside, we fight with a crop harvester like that scene from Cars, which, to be honest with you, completely dumpstered me. On my path to revenge, I reloaded the flashlight for the 100th time, unlocking the Energized trophy. After exacting my revenge, we let Barry out of the barn and make our way into the Anderson house, where we find our last thermos of the episode, number 69. Anyway, another absolute banger plays in here, telling us to find the Lady of the Light. This would connect to a woman named Cynthia Weaver, who has been at various points in the game so far, just flicking light switches and worrying about how they'll hold up over time. Alan and Barry decide to get drunk, which throws us into a first-person flashback of the night Alice went missing. Then Nightingale shows up in present day, waking Alan with a gun to his forehead, ending episode 4 and unlocking Perchance to Dream.
Previously on Alan Wake, under the influence of the dark presence.
Episode 5 starts with Alan hallucinating Weaver talking about keeping something safe for Zane until the time is right. Sheriff Breaker and Nightingale walk in, arguing about how he can't just lock Alan up like he did. Then Nightingale fucking dies. Sarah, for some reason, trusts Alan, so they go to gear up and get him to Weaver, who's at a hydroelectric power plant, I think, using a helicopter. I'd also like to point out now that there's a trophy for not dying or restarting the checkpoint until we get to said helicopter. It goes well, trust me. Well, I immediately fumbled the no-death run, but I figured I could just do it in my next playthrough, so I continued on anyway with my Iron Will really being tested. My Iron Will was then immediately crumbled because I thought I was going to the next collectible, but I went the correct way, with Sarah locking a gate behind us. This, as you can probably guess, was similar to watching a car crash happen right before my eyes, so I decided to just thug it out and restart the entire episode again. Quick stat check before we actually go the correct way and loot our 20th supply chest. We can then head into the diner from the beginning of the game and play the jukebox, Coconut number 6, to unlock our 35th trophy, Drink 'em Both Up.
The same thing I think happened to me after I arrived.
They head to the mayor's office to retrieve the helicopter key, where upstairs is our 12th TV show. This one's weird. A guy answers a newspaper ad for a job. Said job hunts him down, then saws out his free will and they burn it. Okay, I guess. A berry sandwich is almost made in front of us, then we pass through a park housing our 15th sign. After making Sarah watch me have fun on the playground, we enter a church and find our 80th manuscript. Right after that, reaching the helicopter. After being extremely wasteful of basically every possible resource to guarantee my safety, we enter the helicopter, which unlocks an idyllic small town for getting here without dying. Also, I took a break here and it reminded me this is one of those games where the main menu changes depending on where you are in the game, which is kind of cool. Anyway, pretty close to the power plant, the helicopter is swarmed by evil vile birds and Alan falls out. I had to lock in and ignore the drama around me to slither on over to our 80th thermos, then into a building after using every brain cell I have to figure out how to open the door. Across a huge rotating bridge, inside a control room, we watch our 13th TV show. This one is what I imagine to be a Silent Hill 4 reference, with this woman finding a giant hole in her basement wall, complete with the radio sounds you use to detect enemy proximity in the games. With a little air support from Sarah and Barry, Alan reaches the power plant where Weaver had been waiting. She's very upset he's been breaking her rules, namely going outside at night. She then sends him outside at night to cut power to the plant's yard because it's draining power from necessary areas. After a silly puzzle, Alan cuts the power and we unlock a trophy called Gatekeeper.
Who designs these things?
Then I spent about an hour looking for the 20th sign. Quick stat check before Alan heads back inside and Weaver escorts him to the well-lit room. In a pipe on the way there, he hears the helicopter crash on a phone call with Barry, so he decides to split off to go check on them. Surprisingly quickly, Alan finds out they're all good and helps them fight off a bunch of Taken. Then we loot our 25th supply chest. Some theatrics go down. Then we take an elevator to the well-lit room, which, as described, is a well-lit room. Don't really know what I expected, but it wasn't this. Weaver is crazy specific about this room, even knowing exactly which bulbs need to be changed to avoid a burnout. This is even crazier when you know she's been defending this box for about 40 whole years. Anyway, we finally get to see what Weaver has been protecting for 40 years. In the box is one of Alan's childhood memories written, but not written by himself. It was actually written by Zane, which heavily implies that Alan is a creation, or at the very least, some details of his life were created by Zane. Also in that same box is the clicker he gave to Alice when the power went out that one time, along with a page saying he'll use it to defeat the Dark Presence. And with that, episode 5 ends fairly abruptly, unlocking a trophy called the Lady of the Light.
Previously on Alan Wake, I wrote a horror story that has come true.
Episode 6 starts with a flashback of a hungover Alan. He pops some pills and watches our final episode of Cocomelon, unlocking a trophy called Couch Potato.
The show was supposed to be waiting for me on Archivo.
This show is actually normal. It's a DVR recording of him on a talk show. Alice gets home and suggests they go on a vacation alone after he gets a little bit snappy. I'm sure they will have a lovely vacation with no interference from a Lovecraftian entity. Back to the well-lit room, Alan has Barry take Sarah's gun because he needs to do this by himself, I guess. After the cutscene, we pick up our 90th thermos and start on a trophy called Gunless Wonder, which, as you can probably guess, requires you to not shoot any guns until a certain point. Also, it's daytime now because Alan flicked the clicker.
I could feel it.
After a fight with a Moster truck and a switch to a new truck, I got stuck on a hill.
Can't make it. Can't make it. The shit's stuck. Out of my way, son! Door stuck! Door stuck! Please!
I'm too stubborn to just accept defeat, so after wiggling myself free, we find our 24th and final signs back to back at a scrapyard, unlocking our 40th trophy, Bright Falls Aficionado. Our 90th manuscript... Our 90th manuscript is in a ghost town after clearing it out with a big-ass searchlight. This sucked ass without being able to shoot, I'm not gonna lie. Right after, the Dark Presence tries to drop an entire train on Alan. And we loot our last supply chest, unlocking every nook and cranny. Then, right after that, we find manuscript number 91, which is the last one you can get outside of normal mode, which unlocks picking up after yourself. At this point, Alan is back at the lake without a single bullet fired, so we unlock Gunless Wonder. Alan fights a Dark Presence tornado defending the lake with some flares, and holy shit, dude, this part is literally ear-piercingly loud to the point I had to pause and turn the game down to almost nothing. Of course, as soon as I did that, a cutscene started, which was normal volume. But we unlock a trophy called Tornado Wrangler for wrangling the tornado. I feel like that should have been a gold trophy just for the fact that it almost blew up my earbuds, but whatever. Alan jumps into the lake, flicking the switch which has him wake, up in an evil twisted version of his apartment. He shines a flashlight on the word clicker, which, believe it or not, manifests the clicker. After flicking it again, he's sent into the dark place with Zane and sees a weird smiling doppelganger who mirrors his every move. Zane says, "Don't worry, that's just Mr. Scratch," which is pronounced Mr. Scratch was created to take Alan's place in the real world while he's in here, as Zane already knows his plan. Inside of here, there's a bunch of words like the clicker floating around, which Alan burns to manifest the corresponding thing again. At a certain point, we can burn the word thermos, which gives us our 100th thermos, unlocking our 45th trophy, hyper-caffeinated. This is also the last collectible, again excluding the nightmare manuscripts. Back to the story, Alan enters the cabin, and while the dark presence in Jagger's body taunts him, he knows he can't just write them both out, so he writes himself into the dark place to write Alice out, sacrificing himself.
It's not a lake. It's an ocean.
Alan, wake up.
So next is to complete the game on Nightmare, which is really not that difficult. The only difference is that the enemies take about double or even triple the bullets to kill, but it generally feels the exact same. I'm just going to cut around until we're at a point of interest, so here you go.
I could see Cauldron Lake. I thought I could make out the spot where the island and the cabin had been. I'd first heard the poem in a dream, recited by a strange UFO-like light.
As we come to the end of the game, we unlock Alan, Wake Up. We then unlock our very sought-after Platinum trophy?
What the fuck is this piece of shit?
Bro, I gave them so many compliments about the care that went into this trophy list, and they're gonna call it Platinum Trophy? Jokes aside, that is a shitty Platinum name. I love this game. Everything from the story to the janky-ass gameplay to the unnecessarily abundant collectibles. I would 100% do this again, and I probably will for the original on PC at some point. Moving into the 2 DLCs, they're pretty straightforward. They're about the length of an episode in the main game, have 16 and 10 collectibles respectively. Both have a trophy for completing the entire thing without dying or restarting a checkpoint, which is kind of a pain in the ass, along with a few miscellaneous trophies scattered around. Easy, for sure. Anyway, let's start with the signal. We open with a monologue from Alan where he says he's somewhere familiar yet wrong. I wonder what he means.
Welcome to the...
Oh, okay. So he's reliving the beginning of the game, except this time he breaks down the bathroom door where Stucky was said to be. He talks to Zane through this weird bathroom mirror TV thing where he says to find a better point of contact. Back in the main diner, when Alan tries to leave, after taking care of them, we find our first of 10 alarm clock collectibles. Alan runs to a house where he finds another manuscript. A bunch of jumbled words start coming off the pages again, like at the end of the game. One of these words being phone, which gives him a phone. Alan follows the GPS into this very aesthetically pleasing alley where we find our first standee, which is one of the Anderson brothers. Then he hops a fence, and past this destroyed street we find the second standee, which is the sheriff. Anyway, Alan finds some more text, this time saying memory. Burning it manifests a memory of when they were looking for Barry to get the helicopter in episode 5. So we hop a tree, grab an alarm clock, and head to the church on the same route as back then. After the playground comes to life and attacks Alan, of course. Inside the church, we find our third standee, which is Barry. Alan passes through the basement again. This time it's like quadruple the size though. I actually miss a trophy here too. There's these ovens you can burn to make it spit out a flame, which will take enemies out. There's a trophy for opening every single one in here, and I forgot. There's an alarm clock in here, which I did get though. Outside again, Alan burns some more words, one of them eventually being friend. This gives him a kind of evil hallucination of Barry and gives me a trophy called A Friend in Need.
Yowza! Barry.
After a weird chair with a TV on it and before I got absolutely shit on, our fourth alarm clock. Now to me getting shit on. On my redemption arc from getting shit on, our 5th alarm clock, approximately 5 feet from where that transpired, Alan uses a searchlight to make a bridge out of a train car, and going the wrong way after is our 4th standee, the Lady of the Light herself. This next alarm clock, bro, I'm so interested in how long it took me to find this. I don't know why, but I could not for the life of me use the instructions provided to pinpoint it. In that same area, I luckily found the next standee much quicker, which is the other Anderson brother. Alan drops off of a crane into a lumberyard with a few possessed Moster trucks, and they offer you cars, but we're here for the trophies and we're car phobic for this playthrough. All you do here is run to the other corner of this area, reroute the power from the lights, which are protecting you, to the door you need to enter, and make it to the door. The hardest part was there's an alarm clock in this area, which you have to slightly detour for. It's honestly not too bad, and getting through it gives us the license revoked trophy. Some Taken try to trap Alan like a rat, but we ball and steal our 8th clock with no L. After a fight with a chainsaw dude, we pick up yet another clock and move through a maze of wood, where we find our last standee, Alice Wake. Alan crosses this gap in a quite precarious way, then climbs the building, entering it and discovering it as his apartment, complete with a memory of Alice taking pictures of him for his book cover. In the actual apartment, we immediately hear our last alarm clock, unlocking our 55th trophy, TikTok. Then he fights himself in TV form, I think. Or at least he's supposed to, but I was busy taking this raw-ass picture of my cat, so I died. Anyway, this boss fight is extremely easy if you know what to do, which is shoot like 3 flares at it and you're done. If you don't know or don't have those and use your flashlight, oh boy. After getting through that, TV Alan drops a boat to stop real Alan, then he passes out and wakes up in Hartman's lodge again, but we see him in the cabin, so now he's hallucinating from the dark place, I guess. Anyway, that's the end of the signal. We unlock a friend in need for completing it, but we're not done here, so get back in the car. So this run was supposed to be for 3 trophies, one of which was for never dying or restarting a checkpoint. Our first stop of note is back at the church, where you have to burn every single furnace in this basement. It wasn't too bad to be honest, but then disaster struck. My power went out right before this, which means I both lost the original footage and the no death run, which was going pretty well. Skipping to the end because this one isn't really noteworthy for the no death run. Remember how I said the boss isn't shit if you save a few flares? Well, you need to pass it in under 90 seconds for a trophy, and no deaths either, baby! Moving on to the next DLC, the writer starts outside of Hartman's lodge and plays out somewhat the same as that section of the game did, except not. Oh boy, was this episode a trip for the no death run. I was again a little tired, and this was the same day as the power outage, so as you can guess, I was like a caged raccoon set free into the world. Anyway, I entered the maze and went the incorrect way for our first Night Springs video game. Alan reaches the main courtyard in the lodge, and there's a big fireworks show with speakers playing a distorted version of the same song they used on stage at the Anderson farm. This defense is extremely easy because of the fireworks, yet I still managed to die here a few times in my no death run. Not yet though, so Alan moves forward through the lodge, grabbing our second video game, then heading outside where Zane floats a manuscript page towards him. This page summons a ton of words all over that Alan can burn to create a path to this lighthouse, which is now the main destination. I crossed over the path a bit and reached the next video game, except this is not the next video game. The next video game was outside of the lodge, so after a cheeky little restart, we get through the lodge again and pick that up. Pretend that never happened. Now here's the next one, on top of this building that flips over. You just wait for it to flip all the way over and then try not to die jumping on. Well, there's always next run, right? Again, trying to pretend that didn't happen so I don't start tweaking, Alan moves through a giant tree trunk, past a bunch of Taken, and I can finally show my massive brain instead of me being stupid. See how fast I figured that out without even knowing it was correct? Did you see? Come on, bro, just comment like W Flare or something. Let me have one win, please, bro. Passing through that pipe and dispatching a few Taken, we reach an absolute hellhole for the no-death attempt. This area is really cool for normal purposes, but on God, I died around 20 times here just trying to figure out the correct pathing for that run. Finally through it, knowing somewhat how to navigate now, Alan enters an elevator, which gives us the ding trophy. He steps out of the elevator into Stucky's gas station again, and an obscure corner is our 5th video game before a really cool section where Alan burns text saying wire to create a power line from a generator a bit far off to a crane so he can move some logs to use as a bridge. On an actual bridge, we find the 6th video game while Zane explains that there are 2 Alans. His physical body, which is still in the cabin, essentially insane and ready to give up. Then this Alan, which is a manifestation of his rational thought and will to fight out of the dark place. Anyway, Zane drops a tree to help, and on the other side is another video game. After some hiking, Alan enters a therapy session between himself with a TV on his head and Hartman. This session is just him telling Alan everything that would be making him insane if the dark place didn't actually exist. He then gaslights Alan further with fake recordings of Alice shit-talking him, where she even says,
"The only thing that keeps me from killing myself is the hope that I'll never see you again."
But if you stay and listen to all that, as soon as you leave...
What I heard in there wasn't the truth. It was just another toxic mirage. I didn't want to be that guy anymore. I had to make myself see the light.
Continuing on, Alan finds a crash plane which has a video game inside. Then I spent far too long looking for this hidden entrance to a cave. Inside, we unlock a trophy called Creative Space for finding this giant typewriter and some supplies.
I felt like the typewriter was mocking me.
Alan then talks to Zane for the last time, where he gives him a little bit more help. This also starts a similar section to the main game where we now can't shoot until basically the very end. Our only job here is really to burn the word clear to remove some rocks and let the light reach any enemies nearby. Reaching the lighthouse pretty quickly, we unlock the Go Gentle into that Good Light trophy and run behind to find a video game.
The lighthouse. I was relieved to have made it here, but I wasn't sure what was going to happen now.
Alan enters the lighthouse and climbs all the way up, where he climbs through a hatch to Diver's Isle. Instead of going forward to the cabin, we again turn around and run all the way up the hill to find our final video game, unlocking licensed properties. On the way to the dark cabin, Barry shows up again, telling Alan he needs to abandon everything except rational thought, which includes him.
Fine, you're abandoned. Bye.
First though, Birds dive bomb while he fights basically every main character. Once through them all, he gets through Barry, unlocking Kill Your Darlings, which I think is a cliche in writing. But anyway, he enters the cabin and finds himself insane, as Zane said, then gives himself one poke to regain control and merge back into one normal Alan.
Leaving this place would be hard. Maybe impossible. Before, I was ready to curl up and die. Let myself slip away.
So he starts writing a new novel called Return as a sequel to Departure. And that's the end of the full story to Alan Wake. That's not the end of my time here though, because we still gotta do some more stuff. Namely, beat that DLC without dying. Okay, well we can at least get through the tornado in under 60 seconds for a trophy.
The storm was coming!
Presence. Just another memory.
Back to the no-death run, everything is going smoothly at the cabin. So the only other trophy I missed besides no deaths at this point was to stay above a quarter of my health bar, again like the stage defense scene from the main game. And with a sigh of relief, we make it through with no deaths, unlocking no punctuation. For some reason, I just absolutely adored the story and lore around this game. It quickly became a top 5 for me, and despite my personal handicaps, I would 100% it all over again, like I said. The only thing I didn't really like was the clunky combat, but I think that's just something you learn to deal with as you go on. In the timeline of the game, this is where I unlocked each trophy. It took me about a week to 100%, which isn't too bad. It was a pretty short game. Anyway, I don't want to ramble too much because I'm sure this video is long enough as is, but I can't wait to get to Alan Wake 2. I don't think I'll immediately move to it, but it's for sure on my list this year. So with all that said, leave a like if you feel so inclined and comment something funny if you made it here. But yeah, I will see you all in my next battle with my demons, playing a game and making a video on it. But that's all I got.